Father, Son, and Holy Spirit. I'm sure this won't come as a great shock to any of you, but I wasn't exactly a star athlete as a kid. Being shy and pensive, now that was something I was very good at, but sports, not so much. But I loved sports from a very early age, and I began playing them by the time I was about 7. Now, I wasn't particularly gifted at any sport, but I had a special penchant for striking out in baseball. And I can remember being 11 or 12, for some reason that age I was really terrible. And I was striking out all the time, and after striking out so many times consecutively, like any kid, I had my limits, and I would revert to the only thing left that I could do. I would return to the bench, throw my bat and my helmet on the ground, sit on the bench, and start crying. My father would naturally come over, and as only a dad would say, he would lean over and say, "Why are you crying?" And I'd say, "Because it's not fair. I worked so hard at this, and all I do is strike out, and I don't deserve it." I have a very clear memory of saying this on numerous occasions. And he would respond by saying something to the effect of, "Well, you gave it 100%. What else can you do?" And I would say, "I don't know, Dad. Maybe not strike out?" It's not fair. That badly mistaken idea that my best efforts should produce fair, i.e. favorable and desired results. That I deserve better and more for all the effort that I've exerted. But we find out very quickly in life that life isn't fair, at least not according to that definition. We can practice as hard as we want, and we can still lack talent and skill. We can study all day long and still be a poor student. We can pray and petition our hearts out and not get what we want from God, at least not on our terms. Life is hard sometimes. It's not always as we desire it to be. I don't think our parable this morning that's found in our gospel reading is arguing against fairness as equal opportunity or as equal distribution. I think our parable is talking more about that sense of fairness which is defined and cultivated by a sense of entitlement, in which I'm given what I'm due, what I'm entitled to, especially in relation to other people and in relation to God. And though this type of fairness could be defended, it often is defended, the objection of the workers in our parable is understandable. I think Jesus' parable is concerned with the inherent self-centeredness that is attached to that understanding of fairness. An inherent self-centeredness that leaves no room for charity or generosity or humility, where understanding and forgiveness are lacking and the other is never a priority. So our parable isn't so much about existential fairness or economic fairness, but about the great premium of generosity and charity above self-centeredness or what we may feel that we're entitled to. The gospel, in fact, teaches that to be great is to serve, to put another first, to rejoice in the fortunes of others. The context and the occasion for which Jesus tells this parable of the landowner and the workers is a response to those in his inner circle, the 12 apostles, who felt entitled to certain privileges and rewards for all the sacrifices they had made. They had quite literally dropped everything to follow him, as we hear in other gospel readings. And they felt entitled to a place of honor in God's kingdom. What's interesting is that Jesus doesn't necessarily deny that they may not be rewarded, but that their feelings of entitlement and superiority were misplaced, and contrary to his teaching of humility and service. Just before our reading this morning in Matthew's Gospel is the story of the disciples asking rather rhetorically, "So who is the greatest in the kingdom of heaven?" expecting to hear their own names. Jesus presents a child and says, "Whoever becomes humble like this child, that person is the greatest in the kingdom of heaven." St. Peter says a few verses later, "Look, we have dropped everything to be with you. what else do we have left when Jesus refutes his feelings of entitlement? And finally, there's the story of the other disciples becoming jealous as the mother of John and James requests that Jesus elevate them to a place of honor. Jesus responds with that famous verse, "You know that the rulers of the Gentiles lord it over them, and they're great ones. They're called tyrants. But it's not so with you. Whoever wishes to be great among you must be your servant." Not even the 12 were entitled to entitlement. I think that's such an important point, because such a clear standard was being established by Jesus. The inherent self-centeredness of entitlement was and is opposed to Jesus' radical standards of generosity and charity. Our reading concludes with that famous line, "The first will be last, and the last will be first." Jesus acknowledges that the way of the world is rooted in self-interest and greed. But Jesus' vision of the kingdom is the reverse. Generous and abundant charity and generosity. Love rules in Jesus' kingdom. 2 weeks ago, Vince Corso's sermon asked of us if we're ready. Are we ready for a new program year? Ready to refine and live with greater urgency into our calling as Christian disciples? I've given that question a lot of thought, and perhaps you have too. And if I am ready, then for whom? What and who is the priority? I think our parable gives us some indication and direction in discerning that question. So again, are we ready? Ready to perfect our sense of generosity, to perfect our sense of charity, to perfect our call as those who reflect the love of Christ into the world, who taught that to be great is to serve.